So within the past day or so, there's been some drama within the Helluva Boss community. It relates to some people I've mentioned in past videos. This situation, however, involves Erin Frost, Nico Colaleo, Vivziepop and Sallie May's voice actor Morgana Ignis. Like always, I'm going to go through everything and give my thoughts as well at the end. So before we go to the recent drama, we have to go back a couple weeks ago to April 24th. On that day, a Tumblr user made a post talking about Vivziepop. The user starts the post off by saying, "I think it's kinda crazy how Vivzie was exposed for demanding that other indie projects don't pick up her animators." The post includes 3 images of Ashley, Nico and Viv explaining how Viv and Spindle don't want their employees to take too many jobs at once. I've discussed these images in a previous video, but I'll discuss how these images are being taken out of context a little later. The rest of the post just derails into complete nonsense, but the most important thing is that Erin Frost quoted the post and gave her thoughts. Erin says, "It's important to contextualize the majority of Viv's artists are contract, which means they are not salaried employees, have no benefits, and get paid on a task-by-task basis, and they aren't exactly getting paid crazy well." While working on season 1 of Helluva Boss, a co-worker confided in me that Viv basically had them on standby as far as new assignments. Despite their open availability and high quality of work output, that same employee went looking for work to supplement their income, as they had rent and bills to pay, and was told by an indie creator whom Viv had already approached that they could not be hired despite their qualifications because Viv won't allow it. I had a similar problem where I'd gone a while with no assignments due to the pipeline bottlenecking and being generally disorganised. I took on some extra small jobs, then got a huge assignment dropped on me that I was initially given no deadline for. We didn't get a lot of deadlines in the beginning. It was sort of a get it done when you can. At that time, we were also working on stuff much further out in the pipeline. For example, I was given backgrounds to complete for the Spring Break episode well before episode 1 was completed. Then, once Murder Family went live, the pace accelerated greatly. We were being given work to complete for a given episode up until the final hour. One of the assignments that nearly broke me was a bunch of background posters for Lululand. I was initially given no deadline and a very loose idea of the scale for this assignment. There were points when time got wasted because I was still waiting for Viv to give me feedback on process work she'd been sent days earlier. Yes, she was still giving out assignments and feedback on pretty much everything herself at this point. At some point I was handed off to Sam Miller. She wasn't officially a lead at this point, but had been taking on the responsibilities of one more and more as production ramped up. It finally occurred to me to ask Sam for a deadline, and was given about a week to complete all 7 posters, and because I loved the show and idolised Viv, I didn't dispute that deadline despite knowing I'd have to pull all-nighters to get it done. Evidently, the episode they were for was going live at the end of that month, which I hadn't been made aware of prior to this. I ended up completing the line art pretty much the night before the episode launch, with someone stepping in to colorise them. As far as I know, based on what my friends in the animation department told me, that episode was uploaded pretty much as soon as it was finished, and I believe that was the case with all of season 1. We had no backlog, stuff just got posted as soon as it was finished, and as much as it might seem impressive to crank out new episodes every other month, that sort of pace just isn't sustainable for any kind of production, let alone indie. There's a reason networks finish the entire season before airing it. This post ended up getting over 3,000 notes, which is the Tumblr equivalent of likes or shares. Another user asks Erin about unions, and Erin responds with, "Me and a few other artists who'd formerly worked for her attempted to go to the Animation Guild with this a few months back. We even got in contact with someone from the Animation Guild because one of us was lucky enough to have a contact there. We put together a big document of accounts from various people, receipts and all." He said that he agreed what she was doing was screwed up, but unfortunately the guild couldn't intervene as Viv and her studio are not registered with them, and most of us weren't guild members because being in a union or guild isn't free, and if you're not already at a certain point in your career, being in a union might not be worth it. It excludes you from working on most of the lower rent projects you need to work on to build your resume and get much needed experience. I still have that document, but once the guild was off the table, pretty much everyone else was too scared to try and pursue further action. Even if they could remain anonymous, they were too scared of Viv sussing them out and punishing them. The guild had suggested that we try going to the media, and we did, but the story was just not eye-catching enough for any major publication to care. At the end of the day, news, especially entertainment news, needs to have a hook. It needs big names attached. However, with Viv, people project this larger-than-life image onto her, and she simply isn't as big a deal in the industry as people think. I haven't published that document mentioned earlier out of respect to the people who decided to try and just move on. Not that I haven't wanted to. The whole situation was deeply frustrating. I understand people are scared and want to protect themselves, but the fact is that Viv is more than likely still doing the same old shit and hurting more and more people who are just as vulnerable as we were, and she's probably not the only one. The pattern I see, based on my own experience and what I've heard from others, is that Viv specifically wants younger, less established artists, specifically artists who already admire her and are likely to push themselves way too hard because they idolize her and love her shows. It's why she hires fan artists. One of my fellow designers was a literal fan artist who had apparently never worked in animation before. They supposedly never applied. Viv reached out to them based on their fan art and offered them the job, and if that's really the case, then it just underscores my point, that Viv specifically hires people who aren't in the position to defend themselves from being exploited and abused. It's deeply upsetting, and the reason I find it so important to talk about this stuff is because I don't want to think about other artists having to go through what I did. I'm still struggling to get my art back, even 2 years after leaving, and I won't be the last person who has to deal with this if she's allowed to keep exploiting and blacklisting people. A couple days later, on April 30th, Erin quoted another post. This post says, "I was thinking how weird it was that Viv has GNC/cross-dressing/feminine men and yet is too scared to masculinize her female characters, and I totally forgot in the past she actually did in fact do that. Carrie and Cherry Bomb's old design were a lot more masculine/androgynous presenting. Cherry Bomb is a special offense because in her redesign she's completely feminine. Like, what happened here?" The post includes an image of Cherry Bomb. Basically, the user is complaining that Cherry Bomb's design changed. This criticism is a bit bizarre, especially since, as far as I'm aware, that image of Cherry was made when she was Angel Dust's daughter. As we know today, Cherry Bomb was redesigned into one of Angel Dust's best friends. Erin quoted the document by saying, "Excerpt from the document, posted with permission from the person involved. They were incredibly supportive of me when I first came out, and we're still friends to this day. They've been done even worse by Viv than I have, and deserve all the love and support in the world." In the images, we see some conversations with Viv and a user called Ken Draws, dating back to 2017. In one, we see Vivzie talking with Ken about Cherry Bomb. Viv showcases the new design of the character she's working on, and Ken offers to draw it for her. In the second image, we see more conversations. The top of the image features text that says, "I not only helped her with writing, but art too. There were points where she asked to reference images I drew for her, or referred to and referenced art I had done. During a convo, Ken sends his design of Cherry in a specific pose. Viv asks if she can use that image as a reference for Cherry Bomb's final pose, and Ken agrees. She then says she'll credit Ken, to which he agrees again. The final image contains text saying, "Despite claiming that she would credit me for essentially tracing my art, I'd like to state again that I said she may reference the pose. I hardly think tracing my art is the same thing. She has not, to my knowledge, publicly mentioned that I am the original artist. This is a running theme and common trend." So basically the Ken user is angry that Viv didn't credit them for creating the art that was inspiration for Cherry Bomb's art. Erin's comment made reference to a document which was released later today. I will make a follow-up video discussing this document on its own. Erin then shares a comment from Ken, and Ken says, "Further context for those who might be interested. Hey, hi, I'm the artist that Viv traced. The sketch was one of many I did for her while she was a Patreon supporter of mine. Every month I do sketch requests. This was one of those requests. I never agreed nor condoned her tracing my art or using it in the way she did, as evidenced by the screen caps. I only said she could reference the pose, or as she put it, work off it, which to me does not translate to tracing. Because let's be real, the minor edits do not make it a new image." On May 2nd, a Tumblr user asked Erin, "Since you used to work for Vivziepop, how did you feel about Stolitz and Blitzo being together? Did you used to be a fan, or did you always hate the ship? Do you think Stolitz is good at all?" Erin responds with, "I always felt a bit uncomfortable about their relationship. It had potential, and some of the original ideas I heard regarding their development going into season 2 sounded promising, but from what I understand, Viv ultimately went in a different direction. Personally, it feels like she made the weaker choice. Not sure if the delay of the season 1 finale changed things. The episode at Aussies was meant to be the second to last episode of the season, but then I guess it was hung up in legal issues with Kesha's label. I'd left the show by the time all that went down, and it wouldn't be my place to talk, even if I did no details. Regardless, it was an unfortunate outcome, and I imagine it had massive implications for the series going forward. I think Viv just got impatient with her own show, and wanted to get right down to the hardcore drama without actually taking the time to build the foundations for it. She also has a bad habit of nabbing ideas from the crew without crediting them. There's an episode idea I once pitched where the gang attempts to go to New York for a job, but the book takes them to Newark, New Jersey instead, where hijinks ensue. The group gets split up. Many jokes at the expense of New Jersey, and Blitz is mistaken for the Jersey Devil. It has a passing resemblance to the Hollywood episode, not strong enough for me to make a big deal about it, but I will admit the resemblance is interesting. There was another point where a crew member who shipped Stolitz drew fan art of a what if where the two had met in childhood, and I guess Viv loved it enough to incorporate it into the series, despite it being kind of a cringe idea. I'll be honest, based on what I've seen and heard from the many people she's burned, Viv has a habit of absorbing whatever idea she fancies at the time, without considering if said idea actually strengthens the narrative. It's pretty unfortunate considering both Helluva Boss and Has-Been have strong concepts in theory, but she just doesn't have the skill to deliver a satisfying narrative, nor does she care to hire writers who can. So basically Erin is saying that Viv steals ideas from crew members. Another Tumblr user says, when you say episode 8 was hung up by legal stuff, they got Kesha for Helluva Boss, you said her label. Erin responds with, oh, her lawyers? As I said, I'm not privy to those details. I know about as much about that particular situation as the general public at this point. So basically Erin is saying that the shelved finale might not have contained a Kesha cameo. Erin said before that she wasn't working for Spindle by the time that episode was being worked on. The theory that Kesha was going to be in the finale circulated after my video on it got 800,000 views. Erin likely saw my video, which is why she believes this. On that same day, another Tumblr user made a long thread accusing Vivzie of fetishizing trans people. It also makes mention of some other things Viv has been cancelled for previously. One thing that's mentioned is how Erin Frost made the character reference sheets for Millie's family. One of the characters was meant to be trans, but their horns were changed and Sallie May was made to be trans instead. Erin Frost quoted this and said, disgusting, like actually, I had no idea she was using my Sallie design to hawk sexualized merch of a character she 1000% only included in her show for brownie points, with anyone who thinks such half-assed representation is worthy of praise. Sure, she owns the character, that's not being disputed, but I feel so gross knowing a character I designed is being represented like this. Also, defending Blair White of all people. Blair, let's go into downtown LA during COVID with MAGA hats to grief the libs, White. Good lord, I knew she was a manipulative narcissist, but this is some next level monstrosity. So basically, Erin is angry about Viv making changes to the characters and drawing Blair White ages ago. I'll discuss this section a bit later when I get into my thoughts. 3 days later, on May 5th, a Tumblr user asked Erin some questions. The user says, hey Erin, I hope you're having a good day. I hope you didn't mind, but I wanted to ask you some things. First, when you showed more evidence after the first time you called Vivziepop out, did people like Ashley and Kovac get upset because they didn't want to be involved? Did your call-out piece come from a place of anger and frustration? If so, I can totally understand, especially since, and from what I recall, weren't you guys close to reporting Vivzie? I'm sorry if I got something wrong, my memory is foggy, I'm eager to hear back from you and feel free to correct me on anything. Erin responds with, frustration was definitely a part of it. Frustration and betrayal. Ashley had reached out to me to try and get people together to do something, and then she changed her mind once the guild couldn't help, at which point everyone else started to get cold feet. I consider someone like Ashley, who has a significantly larger platform and audience, responsible for speaking up about this sort of thing and using that platform for positive change. Watching the whole affair fall apart because she lost her nerve was pretty upsetting. I felt like I'd been jerked around, I was pretty hurt and angry, and at the end of the day, I did what I ultimately considered the right thing. Never really had much interaction with Kovac, and as far as I know, I haven't really posted anything pertaining to him. So basically Erin is saying that she had a falling out with Ashley and that they were trying to do something about Viv. Later that day, another user asks Erin about Millie's brother. They say, I know you had a lot of asks about Helluva Boss recently, but I have a question regarding Millie's trans brother. Did Viv ask to change his horns directly to you, or did she change his horns in secret? Erin says, they got changed without my knowledge, I think after I left the show. One user says, if you could take back Sallie May from Vivzie's grasp, what would you do with Sallie? I'd absolutely love to hear your thoughts on how you would develop her. Erin responds with, my fiance is trans, and when I showed him what Viv was doing, he was just speechless. As for Sallie, honestly, literally anything would be an improvement. The impression I got though, or at least what I was going for when I designed Sallie, was a self-possessed woman who's already gone through the steps of figuring herself out. She's happy and comfortable with who she is, and I could see that being something Millie both looks up to and might be a bit jealous of. Has probably always been very confident both before and after transitioning. Can be brutal, but doesn't go into the same sort of blood rage Millie does. She's far more controlled and deliberate. That's how I do it. We have so little to work with when it comes to Sallie, which is a shame. Later that day, Erin quoted a reply on the thread from the very start of the video. One user says Erin should sue Viv, to which Erin responds with, "Sadly, it costs money to hire a lawyer and I'm living paycheck to paycheck at the moment. Not to mention Viv's parents are lawyers with deep pockets, so whether or not I have a good case is kind of irrelevant. Viv just has connections that I don't in that regard, and besides, legal battles are the exact kind of long-winded ugliness I don't need in my life right now." A user shared around the images of Vivzie's sausage party OCs. This is something I discuss in my Why Everyone Hates Vivziepop video, but Erin saw the post and said, "What the actual F am I looking at?" A day later, Erin says, "You know, the funniest part about all of this is that Viv still hasn't unfriended me on Discord." So this brings us back to the thread at the start of the video and the start of the saga relating to Nico Colaleo. Before I start this section, I'd like to mention that Nico is the creator of Ollie and Scoops and DreamWorks TV's Too Loud. On May 5th, a Twitter user reposted old images from Nico, Viv and Ashley. The user said, "This is just unacceptable and it shouldn't even need to be explained why." Users reacted to the tweet and Nico saw one of these responses and said, "Hey, that message from me is completely taken out of context. I was just asking about someone's availability. Viv and I are close friends. We both prefer the same person to not work both our projects at once. It just ends up burning the artist out, making both our shows suffer." In another reply, Nico said, "It's just true. Running your own show with your own crew is like being a captain of a ship. Number one rule is to make sure everyone is happy and doing well. If your crew is unhappy, overworked, whatever, that will negatively reflect on your project." A Tumblr user showed this to Erin. Erin said, as a response, "Sounds like some BS to me. I don't trust anyone who considers Viv a friend. She's an awful person, and by extension, I have to assume Nico is too." Erin then quote retweeted Nico's reply, and she said, "That's some BS, and you know it. Artists aren't your goddamn property, and trying to police what they can and can't work on because of how it affects you is disgusting, plain and simple." Erin carried on the discussion in another reply. She said, "The fact that he actively enables the way Viv treats her artists is gross enough, but it's even grosser that he's trying to excuse this enabling by claiming either of them care about the welfare of their staff. The effing nerve of these people." Nico responds and links another tweet of his. In that tweet he said, "Of course, artists can have as many gigs as they want, but Viv and I have the right to feel it isn't an ideal situation. We've had crew members who said yes to do too many things, and then their work ends up late or poor due to burnout. So we at least want to attempt to avoid that happening more." His reply to Erin says, "Obviously you didn't bother to even read my continuing tweets. And who the F are you? You think you know me and dare to claim I don't care about my artist team? Get off Twitter and focus on yourself, you psycho." A Twitter user replied to Nico with, "She's one of those convenient timers who start stuff. She violated NDAs, used private conversations, and highlighted co-workers to harass." Nico replied to the user saying, "Someone just showed me a post she wrote today saying that because I'm friends with Viv, I must also be a bad person. That's a pretty bold assumption. We don't know each other and she has spoken all of 2 sentences to me. Talk about judgmental." Erin quote retweeted Nico's other reply. Erin said, "Viv never gave a shit about her crew being happy. Then when I left Helluva Boss, because of how unhappy it made me, Viv's first thought was to run to other indie creators and kill my chances of getting work with them out of spite. What's your justification for that one?" In Erin's final tweet, she quote retweeted another one of Nico's replies and said, "Crying emoji, oh wow, did I touch a nerve, guy? This isn't a good look, my dude." If we head back over to Tumblr, Erin did a couple more posts. In one, a user apologizes for sending her the Nico tweet and starting drama. Erin says, "No hard feelings. I don't know what fandom reaction you're talking about. I'm only ever on Twitter very sporadically these days. I'd like to thank you for spreading the word. It's unacceptable for creators to act this way. At least they treat their artists like little children who don't know what's best for them, and at worst they treat them like tools to be used and disposed of. It's also hypocritical as F, considering Viv is constantly stealing artists from other projects. I had been working on True Tale prior to getting hired by Viv, and I'm not the only person she hired from that project. Basically, Viv wants to run her studio like a brick and mortar establishment without offering any of the structure or benefits that come with it. It's completely unsustainable and it's clearly hurting people." Erin did one last post saying, "Methinks Nico doth protest too much," with an image of Nico's reply to her. So before I get into what Morgana Ignis, the voice actor of Sallie May, said about the controversy, I want to bring attention to 2 comments Nico left on one of my older videos on the drama. In the first comment, Nico says, "Just noticed today that images of my private messages has been going around, and I like to say that if I'd known one day I'd be screen capped and posted online for the world to see, I definitely would have worded it differently. I can see how my statement makes Viv sound anal or too controlling, but I didn't mean it like that. I simply meant that she prefers her crew to not say yes to too many projects. so they can focus solely on her stuff without them getting burned out. I feel the same way she does about my artists. Of course, we can't or shouldn't control an artist saying yes to however many gigs they want, but from Viv's and my experiences, we've had many instances of our artists taking on too many projects, which causes them to get burned out, be late with deadlines, and their work quality to drop. And so our preference of not having the same person work on both our things at the same time is just to save our artists from overworking themselves, which in the end makes both our projects suffer. Obviously, I don't think I need to explain this to the creator of this video, but it's for anyone out there who's still on the fence with their feelings about Viv. She and I are close friends, and I'll always defend her towards haters. She's a very kind and caring person, she's great. Of course, she or anyone won't mix well with 100% of the rest of people, but for some reason Viv's haters seem to want to focus on these stories instead of the big picture. I left a reply thanking Nico and pinning his comment, to which Nico responded with thanks, and of course I support Viv, she's my friend. If someone had a bad experience working for her, it's none of my business, but also that's their hang up. It's ridiculous that this weekend I'm now getting messages attacking me for it. So with Nico's involvement sorted, it's time to discuss what Morgana Ignis had to say. Morgana Ignis is the voice actor for Sallie May in Helluva Boss. Me and another Twitter user discussed some of the issues with Erin's statements and the fact that Erin blocked me despite me never interacting with her. Morgana saw the images of Erin saying changing Millie's family was transphobic, and she gave her response. Morgana said, LOL, Viv literally talked to me about playing Millie's transgender sister way before they began designs. Sallie May being trans was always the plan. We're early in season 2 and there are a ton of plans for Sallie May, many of which have already been written and recorded. This tweet became a thread at this point. The second reply says, the amount of audacity and BS here is astounding. Morgana followed up by saying, like, also, Sallie May returning has never been a secret. It's been said many times now, but this show has a pretty big plot that we're dealing with right now with two characters with no direct connection yet to Sallie May. Again, we are early in the Helluva Boss series. Her next reply says, also, F off with this shit. The team consulted me on the merch and I was excited to be able to include a sexy trans femme body positive character in a lineup of sexy characters in suggestive poses. Every character included in these sets is posed suggestively. Her final reply says, Sallie May looks like this when the same set had Veronica and Millie looking like that. That was the pin-up theme. Are you offended that Sallie May didn't have bottom surgery or doesn't tuck? Are you mad that she doesn't have bottom dysphoria? Do you think she should feel shame? These tweets were liked by Viv, and Sallie May trended on Twitter as a result of the situation. Viv did a tweet supporting Morgana. So with the entire situation covered, it's time to get into my thoughts on it all. So the first thing is that there's a lot of holes in Erin's arguments. Most of what Erin says doesn't include any screenshots or evidence to back it up. This was a recurring theme in her previous controversies. One example being when she says that Vivzie stole ideas from her, especially relating to Season 2, Episode 2 of Helluva Boss. According to Erin, Viv stole the concept and made that episode without crediting her. Of course, this is all second-hand info with no proof. Her statements about Sallie May come across as toxic and were probably made in bad faith. She made the characters while working for Spindle and handed them off to Viv and the team. She no longer worked at the studio by the time changes were made. Viv and Spindle are allowed to change these characters on reference sheets as much as they want since they own them. Some of Erin's statements are contradicted by other info, like when she says that Sallie May was going to be trans but had a cisgender design. As pointed out by Morgana, Sallie May was always supposed to be trans. Some of her other statements, as pointed out by some Twitter users, could be perceived as transphobic. During one post, Erin says Sallie May was made just for brownie points, and that sexualized merch of her is awful. Morgana Ignis refutes this and says that Sallie May is a body-positive character, and that making merch of something isn't fetishizing it. Erin's statements about Nico Colaleo are also quite toxic. Nico was being dragged into a situation by these people and calmly explained that as a longtime friend of Viv, he supports her. Erin's immediate response was to say he's untrustworthy and that anyone who's friends with Viv is immediately an awful person. This logic just makes no sense at all. Nico didn't like his messages being misused to spread a false narrative, and once he pointed this out, the anti-Hasbin Hotel crowd weren't happy. I explained this briefly in my previous video on the drama when these messages were first shown, but if you take a look at them, they come across as normal. It's entirely logical for Viv to not want her artists to be overworked. Nico backs this up and reaffirms these statements. There's been cases where people have taken on multiple jobs at once, and this has caused issues at Spindlehorse, where work can't be completed on time. This isn't Viv's fault, it's just down to these individuals making mistakes and not consulting her first. Nico and Viv have made shows and know how the industry pipeline works. It's pretty bizarre to me that these people are trying to perceive these conversations as anything other than them being concerned for their employees. As for the Ken Jaws stuff, I document was released today that showed his experience with Viv, so I'm going to do a separate video on that later. Overall, the situation has been a bit of a mess. I hope archiving everything in this video has been helpful, and if you have any opinions on the drama, please leave a comment down below. Thanks for watching.